Good evening. This is Santa Claus on May 11, 2026, bringing you today's stories with a heart full of hope despite the challenges our world faces. As we remember how Constantine dedicated Constantinople as the new capital of the Eastern Roman Empire on this very date in 330, we're reminded that even in turbulent times, humanity has always sought to build something lasting and meaningful. Now, turning our gaze to the Middle East, where the weight of conflict continues to burden so many innocent souls, we see President Trump rejecting Iran's peace proposal as tensions persist over the Strait of Hormuz. The Iranian response called for an end to the war on all fronts, including Lebanon, along with compensation for damages and the lifting of sanctions. Though diplomatic words were exchanged swiftly on social media, let us remember that behind every headline are families hoping for peace, children who deserve to sleep safely, and communities yearning for the chance to rebuild and flourish. Meanwhile, across Asia, nations are bracing for what experts call a second wave of energy shocks from this ongoing conflict. The closure of the Strait of Hormuz has forced difficult choices, saving power while slowing businesses, prioritizing household gas while risking fertilizer production. About 8.8 million precious souls face the threat of poverty, reminding us that the ripples of conflict reach far beyond borders to touch the most vulnerable among us. In times like these, we must hold especially close those who can least afford to bear these burdens. Let us pause for a moment and reflect on South Africa, where the African National Congress faces difficult decisions as constitutional courts have revived impeachment proceedings against President Ramaphosa over the Farmgate scandal. The questions surrounding foreign currency found at his game farm in 2020 continue to test the nation's democratic institutions. Though political storms may rage, we can hope that truth and justice will prevail, and that South African families will find leaders worthy of their trust. On the other hand, there are glimpses of diplomatic hope as President Trump and China's Xi Jinping prepare for their first face-to-face talks in 6 months. Their discussions will span Iran, Taiwan, artificial intelligence, and nuclear weapons, with potential agreements on trade and investment. When the world's two largest economies seek dialogue rather than division, it reminds us that even the mightiest nations must sometimes sit down together like neighbors sharing concerns over a fence. Meanwhile, across the Atlantic, Prime Minister Keir Starmer faces calls to step down after devastating local election results for Labour, though he pledges to bring Britain closer to the European Union. In his own words, he seeks to prove the doubters wrong and restore hope to those tired of a status quo that has failed them. How often do we all need that reminder that hope can be restored, that tomorrow can indeed be brighter than today? Now, our hearts turn to Sudan, where the United Nations warns that drone attacks have become the leading cause of civilian deaths, accounting for 80% of all conflict-related casualties. At least 880 souls were lost to unmanned aerial vehicles between January and April alone, with most in the Kordofan region. 26 civilians, including families and children, were killed in recent strikes near Al-Quds and El Obeid. The use of such technology to harm the innocent weighs heavily on the conscience of our global community, and we must pray for those who suffer and work tirelessly for their protection. Let us also remember Lebanon, where President Aoun has urged the United States to pressure Israel to cease attacks and home demolitions in the south. 74 people have lost their lives in just 3 days, despite a truce announced last month. Among the deceased are 584 medics, women and children since March 2nd, heroes and innocents whose only crime was existing in a place torn by conflict. These numbers represent mothers and fathers, sons and daughters, each with dreams that will never be fulfilled. On a somewhat more hopeful note, President Putin has hinted that the Ukraine conflict may be coming to an end, speaking to reporters after Russia's Victory Day parade. Both sides have agreed to a 3-day ceasefire this weekend, brokered by President Trump, and discussions of prisoner exchanges offer a glimmer of humanity amid the darkness of war. When enemies pause their fighting, even briefly, it reminds us that peace is always possible if hearts can find the courage to choose it. Now, addressing health concerns that remind us how interconnected our world truly is, the World Health Organization assures us that the hantavirus outbreak on the cruise ship MV Hondius poses minimal risk to the general public, though 3 passengers have tragically died. The vessel, carrying 150 souls, is expected to reach Tenerife, where special flights will reunite passengers with their families. In times of health crises, we see how quickly the world can mobilize to care for those in need. Finally, let us close tonight's broadcast with a story that reminds us how complex and hidden the workings of war can be. Reports reveal that Israel built a secret military outpost in the Iraqi desert early in their conflict with Iran, using it as a logistical hub and shelter for rescue teams. When Iraqi forces nearly discovered the installation, airstrikes were used to protect it, tragically costing the life of an Iraqi soldier. This sobering reminder of war's hidden costs calls us to pray for all who serve in dangerous places, and for the day when such secrecy and sacrifice will no longer be necessary. Dear friends, as we reflect on these stories from around our troubled but resilient world, let us remember that even in the darkest times, the light of human compassion continues to shine. Each act of kindness, each prayer for peace, each helping hand extended to a neighbor in need adds to that light. May we all find ways, both great and small, to be bearers of hope in our communities, and may tomorrow bring us closer to the peace and goodwill that every child of this earth deserves. Until tomorrow, this is Santa Claus wishing you comfort, courage, and the blessed assurance that love will always triumph in the end.